Hello, my name is Stephanie Roberts-Camello, and I am in the Forces of Nature show. My studio is here in Pembroke, Massachusetts, and my work is mainly done with encaustic, which I'm going to show you a little bit about. I have been working in mixed media for a long time, but I was introduced to encaustic about 1998 when I took a workshop. And I found it a really difficult medium to work with. At that point in time, I was just using it as an additive to mixed media, saturating rice paper with oil paint on top, and until I took some other workshops. But let me show you about encaustic. Encaustic is a combination of beeswax, damar resin, and pigment. It's a very old technique. It has to be applied in the molten state, and each layer has to be fused to the next. I use either a heat gun or a propane torch. The propane torch is really great for large areas and getting some special effects. The winter is the time when I have the most time to work. And in 2015, we had a little snowmageddon around here. My way of getting back into work when I've been away from it is to do collage. And I knew in my folks' basement they had a bin of old letters, and I didn't know everything that was in here. It was fascinating to me. The letters were bound in twine. They dated back to 1918, and they talked about the history of the Dust Bowl, some of the Great Depression. These were fascinating to me. These were my father's side of the family out west in West Texas, and they were cattlemen and farmers. And although I felt like I was struggling, in these letters there was a lot of struggle going on. I want to tell you a little bit about my breakthrough piece. This is called Drought, and I was experimenting. I was doing layers and layers of encaustic, and I was peeling away parts, creating these curls. And my intention was that I was going to cut sections of them, and I was going to apply them to another panel. And in my process, I broke the board. It's on a piece of masonite. And so it was near the end of the day, so I thought, it's a good time to stop. So I fixed the board with some joint compound. And I had these pieces of wax next to the panel. So the next day I came in, the joint compound had cracked. And I had all of these pieces next to the board, and I thought it looked like the cracked earth out west. And it made me think of that from reading the letters. So I just happened to put these pieces on top, and I thought, oh my God, I think I have something here. And so I had to figure out how to apply them because wax does not glue. So I had to reheat a lot of things and use more wax, and I got them on there, and I hung it on the wall, and I can't tell you how excited I was. I had to keep coming back to the studio to look at it. I knew I had something, and this is the beginning of what I've been continuing. One of the things I love about encaustic is that it holds on to every little mark, every scrape, every fingerprint. It's a great medium for really for documentation. And I noticed when I was working with these that there would be like little stress marks, and it made me think of these letters, these old letters. And also, the layering made me think of, the times, a kind of buried away and revealing, and I thought this was a great medium for that metaphor with the old letters and the past. It was a natural progression for me, cutting out wood shapes to work with these organic forms. There was a lot of planning I had to do. I had to figure out how these things were going to hang, because I wanted them to hang straight and kind of off the wall. And I was also doing some of these where the wax kind of folds around, so I needed to figure out how to keep it off the wall so the wax doesn't touch the wall. So there's a lot of planning that goes into these pieces when I don't even really know what they're going to look like in the end. And I started working with these hardwood shelf mushrooms that you can find on dead logs in the woods. I'm a forager, so that really interests me. I had already a lot of mushrooms in my studio that were really dry, and the wax really adheres to them well. I have a cousin that lives out west, and she sent me a whole bunch of them that I use in my pieces. This piece, called Sizzle, is in the show, and I loved the way this circle and this circle came together. The backing here is from a sunflower that I put in a press, and I completely forgot about it, and it was totally dry in there, and it was so thick, and it made some wonderful stains on the paper. And I combined these things, and I loved how it looked like it was a flame. It was like on fire. So anyway, I hope you enjoyed the show. If you'd like to follow me, I'm on Instagram at Stephanie Paints.
Hello, I'm Deborah Pressman, and welcome to my home studio in Natick, Massachusetts. I started out as a photographer in the 1970s before I went to medical school. Currently, I do mostly painting and printmaking, but photography continues to influence my work in the way it captures time and space sequentially. Okay. Most of my artwork is a response to the wild, fragile, and beautiful places in nature. This current body of work is inspired by a trip to Jökulsárlón in Iceland, which I took last summer. This is a place where there is a massive glacier which is melting and has created a lagoon into which the glaciers calve, and these floating glacial fragments float into the ocean and ultimately melt and disappear. I'm interested in creating opaque and transparent shapes that float in space, and I'm using oil paint, cold wax medium, inks, and collage materials to accomplish this. I usually work on several pieces at once, almost like a strip of film.
Hi, I'm Lia Rothstein, and welcome to my AVA Artist Studio Tour. Some would call my Hanover studio also my science laboratory for reasons that I'll talk about in a couple of minutes. I've been an Upper Valley resident for over 40 years and a professional photographer, teacher, and gallery owner during that time. I had a studio at AVA at one point and taught classes at AVA in photography, digital imaging, encaustic, and cold wax, and have been involved with AVA in various capacities through the years. I'd like to start by showing you a couple slides of what has led up to my current work in biomaterials like the ones that you're seeing in the Forces of Nature exhibit as a little bit of background into my process. A little over 10 years ago, I did some traveling in Iceland and also had an artist residency there. And that's really where I started to become aware of the effects of climate change. Here you can see my friend Ragna looking at a glacier and how much it's receded over her lifetime. And my photography at the time was very abstract, had to do mostly with translucency, color, and light. And I started moving into more sculptural work with my photography, printing on various materials, using encaustic and cold wax over the photographs, and at the same time experimenting with some more experimental materials like gut, again, because of the translucency and lightness of the material. And I was becoming more and more interested in getting back to working with natural materials. At the same time, I became very interested and was reading a lot about microplastic pollution and its effect on our environment. And realizing that as an artist, every time I washed my paintbrush, I was putting, if I were working with acrylic, for example, I was putting plastic derived from fossil fuel right down my sink into the wastewater stream. That's when I became very interested in bioplastic. And bioplastic is nothing more than a material that comes from a natural resource like a plant or an animal. And I started testing extensively various bioplastics, doing lots of research, and was honored by having an artist residency at the Brattleboro Museum of Art as the Climate Change Artist in Residence in 2023. I experimented with all kinds of coloring agents with the bioplastic material that I was using, but became aware that some of the pigments might not be environmentally very sound, and started using and creating my own botanical pigments, like you see here in this sea change sculpture, where I used a butterfly pea flower. Some of my experiments didn't work as I expected. The biomaterial tends to change a lot in heat and humidity and over time. And I started to embrace that in my own work because I couldn't control it. I decided for my AVA show that I really wanted to test the biomaterials that I'm interested in using by making a large installation piece, like the one hanging in the gallery, As Above, So Below. In order to make this piece, I had to test how the major material, which is called chitosan, would hold up. Chitosan is derived from crab shells that would otherwise be thrown away, that are ground up and then treated with basically an acetic acid or vinegar solution in order to break them down. And I wanted to see, would it work for a large-scale installation? Would it hold its shape? Would it be strong enough to support itself? How could I color it in order to get the kinds of sea-like ocean colors that I was interested in? And most importantly to me at that point, could I make an installation without any synthetic materials at all? So no plastics, no glues, nothing derived from fossil fuels. And would it work? Could I do it? that was the goal that I kind of set for myself with this large piece that you see in the gallery. And I'm interested in the idea of making art that isn't necessarily intended to last forever. This is a little ironic for me because as a photographer for most of my life, and at one point I was photo archivist at Dartmouth, I was most concerned about only using archival materials that would preserve history for a long time. But now I'm trying to raise awareness about materials that might be used for expressive artistic purposes that are not derived from fossil fuels. And I'm very concerned about climate change, its impact on my grandchildren, and the effect on ocean and marine life as well. While I describe a little bit about As Above, So Below, I'd like to do a little mini demo on the camera here. I'm going to put a piece of chitosan material that I've made, and here it is. I'm holding it in my hand, and I'm going to put it in a glass of water and then check it in a couple of minutes to see how it has held up or how it's degraded. And you can see that it's a very translucent, thin material. You can see me right through it. And it's a little bit, has some flexibility, but it's a little bit brittle. It's not super soft and squishy. It's an amazing material. This came from crab shells. And I'd like to put it in the glass of water and set it aside. And then when I'm done describing the installation, let's check it again. In the installation, As Above, So Below, what I was trying to create was the sense of looking through layers of water, and on the surface are bits of plastic that are floating in the water, like the slide that I showed just a little while ago. And you can see the plastics filtering down through the ocean, or it could be a river. And as they get down lower and lower, they get smaller and smaller until you get all the way to the bottom, where there are pieces of biomaterial that are more like micro or nanoplastic size. And the reflected surface at the bottom, which is silk with bioplastic material on it, is basically meant to reflect up from the bottom of the ocean that what was above the water is still below the water. It doesn't go away. It just changes its scale and becomes smaller and smaller, where fish and other crustaceans, like the crab that I used to make this material, could eat it. And then when we eat these animals, we're ingesting bits of microplastic, as we now know. So what I'm trying to do with this installation is to illustrate how everything is connected. We're all connected with other creatures. We are, all the earth is connected by the oceans that unite all the continents, and that we're all connected to every other living thing. I'm interested increasingly in art that returns to nature and is ephemeral, as we ourselves are. And so the fact that this piece may change while it's on display at AVA, I don't know if it's going to hold its shape. I hope so. And I'm kind of embracing the idea of art that changes over time, that doesn't last forever, and excited about thinking about producing art that returns to nature. That biomaterials, many of them are completely biodegradable, not all of them, but under the right conditions, they can be biodegradable and return to nature. And I'm increasingly interested in producing that kind of art. I can't do everything about climate change and microplastic pollution and the proliferation of plastic in our world, but I feel like as an artist, I can do something, and this is the something that I'm doing right now. So let's check my bioplastic over here. And it's only been a few minutes. And I'd like to show you that that piece, which is in here, has broken down to this now. So it's not completely broken down into the water, but it's only been a few minutes. And I can tell you from all my experiments that in the course of a day, it would be completely dissolved. So in just a few minutes, it's become this from that brittle, transparent piece of biomaterial that I showed you just a few minutes ago. So if you'd like to learn more about my work, my website is my name, basically www.liarothstein.com. And I post work on Instagram, and my handle is Lia_Rothstein Studio. Thanks a lot.
I'm Marina. I live in Lexington, Massachusetts, in a small, light-filled house with a huge yard. I work in my studio, which is downstairs in the basement, this way. Here's my very messy studio. It always looks like this. I work in so many mediums, experimenting all the time with new ones, so it's incredibly cluttered. It's often hard to find a surface to work on, but at least I know where everything is most of the time. Working with color has been a lifelong project. I've spent years weaving rugs and then years as an illustrator and a textile designer, finally to arrive at a place where I can just play with pigments, an endlessly fascinating form of play for me. In the last few years, I've spent most of my time very close to home. My garden feels vast, even though it's less than half an acre. It has a generous, natural character of its own, full of life and solace, color, texture, form, light, and shadows, positive and negative spaces. Lots of surprises, not to mention the expected animals, bugs, and birds. I hope I can share some of this spirit within my paintings. I spend quite a lot of time playing in the dirt, almost as much time as in my studio. Since childhood, I've had a slightly lazy eye, so my eyes don't always track well together. This reduces my depth of field, so I check for shadows in order to understand volume. I'm aware that my eye system is different and that I see the world somewhat flattened. It's a different perspective and viewpoint that I bring to my work and partially explains my focus on color and texture and the play of light. I try to keep that light moving the way it does outdoors. Color creates light, and light creates form. It's all a very real illusion to me.
My painting process originates from my time as an illustrator, when I had to fax pencil sketches to clients before creating final digital images. The finals were done with Adobe Illustrator and Corel Painter using a Wacom tablet. I did editorial illustration for magazines, books, packaging, logos, huge underwater murals for a children's museum, and also a lot of gardening images. I still begin my work with pencil sketches or crayons. I love crayons, pastels, oil pastels, but I'm not so fond of acrylic. I love experimenting, combining materials in new ways, which is why my studio appears to be so chaotic. I used to just use encaustic and oil, but because oil takes so long to dry, I've recently learned to incorporate water-based urethane mixed with aqua dispersion pigments as my base layers. I was an early adopter of the iPad and Apple Pencil, which is an amazing tool. I love the app Procreate, and sometimes I do like to keep my hands clean. Working from the iPad, I can create an underpainting, saturate it with beeswax or urethane, then paint with a variety of mediums: encaustic, pigment sticks, inks, watercolors, gouache, flash, cold wax, oil paint, all with the intent to construct the luminosity, the space, and the shifting light I see outside at different times of day. My collages are created by layering lightweight Japanese papers that allow me to build color transparencies with added depth. I create this hand-painted paper and then collage with a wax medium that increases transparency, then oil paint on top of that, always applying thin layers. I'm constantly tweaking color. They take a long time to dry, and when they finally are dry, the paintings are finished with a few layers of buffed cold wax to protect them.
I am Samuel Neustadt. I grew up in Irvington, New Jersey. Then I moved to Brooklyn, New York, where I went to Pratt Institute and received my degree in architecture with additional studies in sculpture. I have traveled the world over the past 50 years, exploring its countries and cultures. Throughout my travels, with pen and pencil in hand, I have enjoyed capturing the people, landscapes, and architecture of the world. After watching a video lecture by the British artist David Hockney about his digital art, I became intrigued by this new medium. Because of my background in AutoCAD as an architect, I felt comfortable with this new medium. It became a natural direction for me to pursue in my painting. For the past 10 years, I have lived on a wooded hillside in Pomfret, Vermont, with the trees, copse, forest, meadows, and my wife, Brenda, who is also an artist. The natural beauty surrounding my studio has inspired me. So several years ago, I decided to use the inspiration from my second-story studio windows as the focus of my new show, Across the Road. The forms, colors, and textures are as I interpret them over the course of several years, through the seasons and the varying natural light of the day and night. These paintings are not a snapshot in time, but a kinetic investigation of the subject. Each painting is developed over a period in time, depicting the effects of varying light. Although most of my philosophy incorporates both my 2- and 3-dimensional art, the sculptural forms are formal and rectilinear rather than organic. However, as in nature, where each tree limb allows for the growth of the next, ultimately creating the overall form of the tree, these sculptures are created by the growth of individual elements moving through space, ultimately creating the sculptural form. Accidents often play a significant role in my work. I see something, maybe an accident, and I say, that's interesting. I pursue a different path, not my original thought. I start in a new direction. It may be representative of part of my original thought, or it may represent something totally different. The digital paintings are exhibited at a scale large enough to allow the viewer to easily study the impact of the forms and color. The sculptures are presented as much to view the sculptures as the spaces that surround them and how the changing light affects them. The juxtaposition of the painted images and sculptures create a more complete understanding of my work at present. I use the same painting subjects and sculptural forms with different interpretations by use of color, texture, composition, and positioning. The viewer may recognize this as they experience the show. A painting can take anywhere from a few days to a few months. A sculpture can take a month to 3 if I'm lucky. However, less than a minute in high-speed video, so I've included one at this time. The painting process is with my stylus on an iPad Pro with a palette I have arranged and using various layering techniques I have developed. I am looking forward to the next painting adventure with Brenda somewhere in the world. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Erika Lawlor Schmidt. I live in Paulet, Vermont. Welcome to my AVA Artist Studio tour. So here we are in my studio. As you can see, this is a etching press here. This is what I work on. I'm a printmaker, and I work in collage, and I work also in 3D assemblage of objects, and I work in performance. So I have been working on this press for 25 years. I purchased this in Florida, and it was disassembled and brought up here in 2008. So it's been a wonderful etching press for me to work on. I also work in collage and ceramics. I actually started out in ceramics in high school and earned a degree in ceramic sculpture before going back to school 15 years later and pursuing printmaking and performance. So the similarities between printmaking and ceramics really come from the fact that they're both process oriented. So you have to be a person who really enjoys the process of having a very deliberate plan and technique to creating a plate or creating a ceramic sculpture. There's timing involved, all kinds of equipment, but there's also something similar, and that is the improvisation and serendipity that comes along with those. So for me, I approach everything with that improvisation sense of responding to the moment and to what's coming in to the work. Printmaking is often thought of as is a great way to create an addition where one matrix is created and then it's printed many, many times in addition, so that it's very democratic. One image then can be enjoyed by many, many people. So it's a really wonderful, that's what attracted me initially, was the idea that I could take an image and reproduce it many times. However, what really interests me is that I can expand on that idea and continue to create new images from one matrix or one idea. Monoprinting is very good for that. I work in monotype, monoprint, collograph. I do etchings also, and wood cut reliefs and lino cut reliefs, and I combine those often with that collage sensibility. And I've been doing that for the last 30 years. I started out really probably as a kid collecting objects and natural things along the shore of Lake Michigan when I was a child, and I was making objects already at that time and painting, and that led into the ceramics, and the ceramics then led into printmaking, and I have a background in dance and music, so all of these mediums and processes inform each other, and I can really move fluidly from one to the other. However, they are still very specific in what they express. So in terms of the AVA Gallery show, the show contains two bodies of work, and one is a series of collages that are really collected over a period of time that focus on birds. I have been an observer of birds my whole life, and I feel like I align with the view or thought about birds with several indigenous cultures that see birds as symbols of the departed, as spirit guides, as messengers. And indeed they are. the canary in the coal mine for us in our current day. So the fate of birds is indicative to the fate of humans, in my belief. So I have this particular show, the collages that I've chosen for the show are very much focused on birds, either as that spirit guide, as there are pieces where the birds are really actually transfigurations of humans or service spirit guides, and other times they really focus on the fate of birds and sort of the challenges to the migration of birds, to the habitat of birds. And there's just this real closeness that I feel to the fate of birds that keeps me them appearing in a lot of my work. The other series that I'm showing in the AVA gallery is titled Opening and Closing Heaven's Gate. And that is a series that I did in 2020. I started working on it it started out as a cloud study, and as the news came in about the pandemic, the images got darker and more ominous, and as the pandemic continued, the entire series began to explore this porous border between the physical and the spirit world. So this series is included there, and those are all monotypes. The way I do these is through an additive and reductive method. I manipulate the ink on the plate, and that's how I have worked those. I'd like to just point out one interesting thing that I do, in that here you can see it in an original collage. This piece is in the show. This is called The Reincarnation of Anna Pavlova and Marie Taglioni. And so this is the original collage. And when I was in residency in Italy last fall, I took that collage and photographed it and turned it into a photopolymer etching. So this is something that I enjoy doing. I can take the same image and can give it an entirely different feel and translation from the collage to a print and back into a collage. So this is something that if I've got a piece that lends itself to that, I like to do. Here's a collage. This is a collage on panel. And then the same thing, I turned it into a photopolymer etching. So I do like to work with the etching process when I have access, but most of the time I'm using just what I have, the materials that I have here. Anyway, I'm looking forward to the show at AVA Gallery. I'm so thrilled to be there, and you can find more of my work at www.erikalawlorschmidt.net, and I look forward to meeting you perhaps at the gallery. Thank you for visiting.